This is the Slots and Sockets podcast, episode number 3. I am Moose.
And I'm Penguin.
And we got a whole bunch of fun stories for you today. AMD's got some good pricing leaks coming out. Intel is speedrunning killing their company. We've got some interesting stuff with the GPU side from AMD, and NVIDIA's getting an antitrust investigation. So let's kick it off. First story of our day, Turbo, is the pricing links. The pricing leaks.
Pricing looks great. Pricing looks. We kind of had an idea that they were going to be AMD was going to be oh my gosh, aggressive on their pricing.
Yep.
And they are. So cheaper than last generation. And I think. For gamers' perspective, this is a huge good deal. You're going to be able to basically get cheaper than last generation, but a percentage bump in IPC, and I just think this is great.
Yeah.
I think this was in AMD's plan kind of the whole time, was to be a little aggressive on this, and I think. They didn't foreshadow, Intel sinking themselves, but I think this really kind of is a 1-2. Intel is shooting themselves in the face, and AMD is going to just pull the second trigger, and shoot off the other side of the head. I think the pricing looks excellent, and for gamers, like, you cannot get better than this. We're finally seeing generation over generation decreases in pricing and increasing in performance. So I really think that this, when we're all said and done, is nothing but awesome. I don't see how there's really any downside to this. The other thing that we're coming across, we had the delays. It looks like AMD is trying really hard not to pull an Intel here. I think they realize this is a huge opportunity for them. They don't want to mess it up. It almost, and from what we're hearing from multiple leaks, not just one, but multiple leaks, is that AMD is just trying. They're looking at what's happening with Intel and saying, we want to make sure we don't do that thing, because that thing is bad.
Well, yeah, and they also have the 5800X3D history behind them as well, which didn't get caught until several months in. So I don't blame them for taking the extra caution there, because at the end of the day, while it delays us getting silicon, it just helps us make sure we get a better product. Which, it looks like a beast if you put a 9950X under water cooling, because the results on 3D Mark that HWBot is reporting on are just bonkers. 29,000 3D Marks just for the CPU.
If we can see a similar performance with X3D, these processors are going to be impossible for some time for Intel to match.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Intel's been struggling to match or beat AMD for how long? And all of this stuff with 13th and 14th gen is more than likely related to them pushing stuff just too hard.
Well,
to beat AMD.
I think the other half of this, AMD also realizes that they're on a very inexpensive node and process. They know that they can be cheap, and I think they also realize that Intel can't. I mean, they really can't now, because they're going to have to build up everything twice, 3 times, however many they need to make of all these chips.
Yep.
And AMD realizes that if they can get this right and get some really happy gamers in AMD that have been on Team Blue for a long time, we're going to see a shift where Intel is going to have to prove over multiple generations to earn back those buyers' trust. And I just don't think that's an overnight thing. Um, I think AMD is doing everything right to earn the trust, and I think Intel is doing everything right to push them to the other side.
Yep.
So, I think that's it as far as CPUs go with AMD. Okay, so Intel. I know there's going to be some talk on Intel and what's going on. Um, the one thing we want to preface by saying here is, look, the stock market, the economy right now sort of suck.
Hmm.
We saw this on Friday. I mean, and Intel took a bloodbath, and you thought, oh, okay, well, that's Intel. There's bad news. And it doesn't help that they had their earnings call on Thursday. It transferred over to a really, really bad Friday for Intel. Um, what I don't think people need to keep in consideration is that the tech industry as a general took a bloodbath on Friday. Over the weekend, we still saw aftermarket trading on all of these tech companies down, and then we saw it repeat again. Um, they were saying the big seven in general, and then that's the big seven tech companies. Um, Lost $650 billion of value between 2 days on Friday and Monday. So,
Yeah.
um, look, the tech market does not look good right now. Hopefully, you did not buy a crap ton of tech market on Thursday, because if so, I'm sorry, that sucks. Um, but the other half of this is that I think a lot of this stuff is going back to investors looking at maybe different things than we are. I don't think, and if you look at a lot of financial websites, CNBC, Bloomberg, if you look at Intel, the interesting thing is that they're more worried about why they missed AI craze and the numbers on like how data center missed their target by 9% and their earnings per share target they missed by 80%, and now that type of stuff. Um, which is true. Those are all bad news, but you find maybe one or two of these, hey, these processors aren't doing so hot. And so I think what we might be seeing here is for Intel, it's we performed so poorly that nobody cares that our CPUs are cooking each other.
Yeah.
Um, eh, Look, I think any way you look at it, it's bad news. It's not good. I feel bad for Intel employees. Apparently, 15% of them are going to lose their jobs.
I've
Um,
seen as high as 18% in some places.
yeah, it's going to be a big number, and it needs to be. I mean, AMD is beating their socks off. AMD's growth from last year to this year, I think right now they're at 7.5 billion in total sales, whereas last year combined, I think they only did two or three. Intel is down on this in a market that they really should be excelling in, and I think it just goes to them making really, really bad decisions.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
I really think that this is not I don't know if this is a design error. I don't know if this is a cultural piece. Um, but historically speaking, we can point to multiple bad choices from Intel.
Yeah.
If you
Multiple
look at this, yeah, they missed the boat.
multiple bad choices that ended up with Gamers Nexus removing Intel from from their investigation process.
Well,
Like
I even go beyond that.
you really got to hose the pooch to get Gamers Nexus to do that.
Yeah, I agree, and I think this is Intel. Look, I think their communications that we're seeing from Intel are very big business. I don't think there really should be any surprise. Gamers should be upset, and I feel bad for people who have a 13th, 14th gen processor because that sucks. I feel even worse for people who have a system integrator that isn't on top of it, like some of these are about replacing chips.
Yep.
Um, but at the end, when it's all said and done, you know, if we look at what Intel has done and spent their money on, it's really interesting. You know, they tried x86 phones. How'd that do, Scott?
Well, I was validating them, and one of the blue badges I worked with had an Intel phone. It was right on par with my Pixel or Nexus 5 rather, and it died. Like it was a Motorola phone with an Intel processor, and it never went past that one model, as at least as far as I'm aware.
I mean,
It wasn't a bad part. It's just they didn't get traction for whatever reason.
you know, and the problem is that, you know, that's money, right?
Yep.
That's R&D money. That's, you know, taking time in fabs to build them and to engineer them and to work with partners, and for partners to not make money on it and for Intel to not make money on it, that was just bad. Um, you know, if GPUs, I don't think anybody is going to say that Intel is doing well in graphics cards.
No. In fact,
Um,
I think in that same Gamers Nexus piece recently, Steve mentioned that the driver team is potentially a skeleton crew, which does not bode well for Battle Mage.
you know, and the thing is, they put a ton of time and effort into it, and then it's almost like they were far enough off that they couldn't get real money out of them. And I think the overall notion is that Intel is expensive in their fab facilities right now. So even if we can fab them in house, it would have been cheaper to have someone else build it outside that would have been more fuel efficient, you know, more energy efficient and probably faster and cheaper. But you know, the Intel piece, and then, you know, the honest truth is, I think this goes along hand in hand with graphics cards, is they missed AI.
Yeah.
Um, you know, Intel, I would have expected Intel to be a company that would have been up there with an Nvidia and an AMD. And had they gotten that graphics piece right, they could have really done something, but they missed. You know, now with that being said, they did sell more CPUs because of the AI craze. And so some will say that yes, they did. And I would agree, they did. But when I buy one CPU and 5,000 NVIDIA GPUs, um, there's a numbers game here from a sales perspective. I would be much better, happier on the 5,000 side of sales rather than the one or four or
Yeah.
however many that is. And, you know, again, they missed it. And, you know, I think that this needs to come back to, and realistically speaking, I think the CEO needs to be fired. Um, I think Intel is in really, really bad shape. Um, and I think that if this continues, there is a very good chance that I could see Intel being purchased by somebody else. They are trading below $20 a share. It's 19 and change. Um, they've lost since the beginning of the year. They were trading at $45 a share. It's now at 19.
They've lost
They've lost,
60% of their value.
yeah, 60%. And we don't have, and there hasn't been a lot of traction on this warranty liability piece. It could be really, really bad if some of this stuff kicks off. I mean, liabilities, we already start seeing the Intel class action lawsuits on these processors. Um, we know that those are going to go through. We know Intel is going to lose. There's nothing Intel can do to save face here. Um, the best thing that they could do right now is try to just make everybody right.
Yep.
And big business is not doing that. So look, there's a couple of these topics with Intel I wanted to make sure we touched on because I think these are really, really important. First, make it very clear Intel is treating warranty work for boxed and tray pieces differently.
Yep.
So if you bought a Dell and you're not happy with Dell's customer service, or let's be honest, you bought a 1-year deal with Dell because you thought, well, if it goes out, it's just, a part here or there. I don't know. I don't hear if OEMs like them are doing a good job at extending out warranties, but make it very clear if you bought a Dell, you are stuck dealing with Dell support. Intel is not going to help you. And the other half that is and what's weird is you hear that, and then on the other side, Intel on this says, well, if you've got a dead processor, ask us for RMA help, and when that fails, ask again and keep asking until you get somebody who's really nice and gives you a processor. It's not good. These are the RMA process is going to be bad. It still is bad. It's not going to get better. And then the other big thing, and that I wanted to point out is the laptop HX chips. So those are the same silicon as the desktop parts. So if you're not aware, Intel has mobile chips, and then they have like these extreme mobile chips. And these extreme mobile chips are desktop chips that are kind of down clocked to be in a mobile environment. Okay. But
They're
in all
usually in
intents and
that
purposes,
65-watt range too.
they are. They will boost up to that range. Now, and Intel has said, "Oh, it's just our desktop chips." I think the problem is that Intel says a lot of things, and I think the loaded question is that no one really believes them,
Yeah.
including their own people. I think we're going to see HX chips are going to be including this. And as much as Intel does not want that, because me replacing a CPU is inexpensive, me replacing laptop CPUs is impossible because the replacement process there is give me your old laptop and I'm going to give you a new laptop, which means I need to give you new everything.
Not necessarily, because some of those HX chips are socketed. Most of them, like if they're the
The money,
super
though,
thin
the
stuff,
money,
oh, the
the
money
money
is
to
is the killer.
the money to open up those, and how
Yeah,
many of those things are you going to get back, put back together, right? And that's what I'm getting
yeah.
at is that the if if I paid a tech to replace a CPU on a desktop, it should be the most I would expect anyone to charge outside of parts
Half an
is
hour of labor.
maybe $100,
Yeah.
right? That's worst case scenario. Um, if it's a laptop, even if it's socketed, let's say it's socketed, okay, a socketed HX laptop. I don't think you get out of that cheaper than $200, and that's being very generous.
No. Well, I
I
mean,
mean,
I
I
just
could be
repasted my
more.
GPU and CPU in my laptop recently, and that was a good hour process. I wasn't replacing. Granted, my chip's an AMD and it's not socketed, but yeah, I've been into that laptop. I know how to get into it, and it still took me a good hour to repaste that stuff.
I just think that well, and that doesn't even get to non-socketed chips, because if it's soldered directly to the board,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
The
you
problem is that now the fix is disassemble everything put in a new board and hope that you have it the same, exactly the same way and put it back together. But, every time you do that, you know how it happens. You get these little clips that break off or they don't fit back in right. And the problem is that
Or
with
you
all
get
of
a
those,
bad mount on the heatsink, you know? I mean,
it,
yeah,
it's
you're going
just
to break stuff.
the laptops were never designed really for service.
No.
Desktops were, with a lot of respects, and the notion is that if those HX chips are affected, now I will tell you, we will find out on this now that we have investigations and we have very smart people who are getting paid lots and lots of money to prove that Intel, really did screw the pooch this bad. We will find out.
Yep.
And I also wonder, you have 18,000, 15,000, however many thousand of people who are going to be no longer with Intel and looking for jobs. Um, I wonder if you start having some rumblings of maybe some unhappy people saying, "Oh yeah, we totally knew about it." Do you want the emails?
Yeah.
Let me help you with your investigation, right? I totally could see that.
You're getting
And
laid
and if
off. Bring a thumb drive to work.
right, I mean, it's gonna be so bad. It's gonna be so bad. Um, so, and the last thing I'm going to say about this with Intel and the microcode, um, if you've done damage to your processor, nothing that Intel is going to do is going to fix this. It is dead. It is damaged. There is no repairing. There's no magical code. Microcode is not going to make it better. And the other half of that is, these chips are going to have a short shelf life.
Yep.
These chips, I think the notion is you'll have chips that you've got 10, 15 years still running strong. And I think that's normal for these, as long as don't cook them. Um, I think we're going to find that 13th and 14th gen processors have, instead of a double digit, I think you're going to have a single digit year lifespan. I think we're going to see these, and this is going to go down in history as probably one of the worst CPUs ever made.
That's saying something.
I
Because
really
we
think
had
that.
Cyrix.
I tell you, I mean, these are bad, and the fact that it took Intel this long, I just, yeah, it's bad. The other thing that's really kind of interesting in Puget Sound, now in Puget Sounds, they defended Intel um, on this, but if you look at their chart that they released, um, did anyone not see the 15 plus percentage failure on 11th gen parts that they released?
Yeah, not just 15%, but I have a feeling that 15% probably got the to do the conservative voltage settings that they started
Maybe.
doing, which saved the 13th and 14th gen. But if you look at their chart toward the end, 14th gen is going gangbusters on warranty failures.
It's not
And
good.
the last 3 months are a bloodbath for 14th gen compared to everything else. And the question is if if Puget Systems is running with very conservative voltages on their CPUs, and they knew about this back with 11th gen and started doing this,
This is why somebody
14th gen
Intel,
parts are failing now
so
after that.
somebody Intel has an email that goes back to 11th gen and probably says we probably shouldn't do this. If we do this, we're going to have problems like this, and this.
Yep.
And there is an email out there that is going to come out of this investigation, and it is going to skewer some people. And I think it's going to skewer a lot of people's faith in Intel. Um, Now, with what's the behind the scenes view from me on Puget Systems, um, I think that there are people who are not being as negative towards Intel as others because they're worried that Intel will hold a grudge. I get it because Intel is that way. They absolutely think that they haven't done. I believe there's people at Intel who do not feel that this is an issue and this is just going to kind of blow away. It's not.
Yeah.
Um, they should be taking this heat. But two, um, there are people, and I'm not going to name names, but there are people that I have been very surprised have been surprisingly low key on this, and two, surprisingly trying to shift blame towards motherboard manufacturers or BIOS and that type of stuff, and not really saying a lot about Intel.
Well, that's where a lot of this started too. Is the Intel blaming the motherboard manufacturers for pushing too much voltage, and pushing, and wiping out the PL1 and PL2 limits, and just telling the CPU go crazy. But if you go back to Gamers Nexus video, uh, recently they were telling, like I had suspected, they were telling motherboard manufacturers, well, here's the baseline, but you don't really want to go with the baseline. Go with performance as your baseline, because baseline is not the baseline. I literally had to watch that video 3 times to wrap my head around everything Intel was pulling.
You know, I think one of the things, and it would again, I come back to Intel should probably do the smart thing here and just fess up and just be like, yep, okay, it was bad. We screwed up. Rather than letting all of this bad press continue to linger. Um but the problem is that that's going to be somewhat at Intel saying, yes, we screwed up. And I don't think in my humble opinion that they can or will ever do that. And if this gets dragged out, you're going to have years of bad publicity rather than just cutting it, say, we're wrong. Yes, we had this problem. This is the microcode is going to fix it. All of these processors have damage to some, one way or another. We're going to have these, and we're bending up every 15th gen process, 14th gen processor we can, and everyone gets a 4990K.
Yeah,
You know,
I that would be the way to
or
do it.
something along those lines.
Yeah.
Um,
But I mean, the last time they did anything remotely close to that was with the first
Ever.
generation Pentium, 1993, when they had that math issue where there was a weird division error or something. You got a weird result. And they took ownership of that. They haven't since, and that's the problem. Is Intel is simply dodging as much as they can. And, it goes back to the first big dip their stock took when Intel was saying, it's the motherboard manufacturers, it's the motherboard manufacturers. No, it's not your CPU. Your motherboard's killing it. And now it turns out, oh, it's actually the microcode that's forcing the voltage too high.
could you imagine what the anger and the press would be saying if by chance Intel had won one or both of these AMD these console contracts,
Mm-hmm.
and this was happening on a console basis, and there was a cover up to maybe not admit that they had processors that were killing themselves because of this. And oh, by the way, it turns out that there are millions that cannot be repaired, and you just throw them away and you have to get a brand new console.
Mm-hmm.
It would kill. I mean, I think that this is going to have a negative impact. I think this puts them in an area to be taken over from a financial perspective.
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll kill them, but you're getting close. And if it turns out that this is a really big number of affected parts, and maybe it comes out in the investigation that it's including laptops, um, this is going to be bad. Now, the last thing on CPUs, we talked about all the bad stuff, and I just want to throw this out there as, just look at, I believe that a lot of this goes to organization and management. All of the bad choices that Intel made, graphics cards, they're still sinking crap tons of money into, that's still failing. x86 on phones, which is failing. Their processors are being rushed out the door, and they're losing market share there. On the other hand, AMD fought and kept consoles,
Mm-hmm.
continue to develop consoles. There's going to be pretty firm numbers that we're going to have a PlayStation 5 Pro for Christmas for you Moose this year. Um,
Why would I
so,
downgrade?
but AMD has gotten into consoles and kept consoles.
Yep.
Um,
And that all
they
goes down to
because
licensing.
that goes to licensing. They've done a really good job at making APUs, from understanding how those consoles work, because those are all APUs, CPUs and GPUs in the same die. That's got them into a really, really unique space with mobile gaming. They pretty much power everything that is mobile. I think the only one out there is the MSI Claw, and early numbers are that thing is a heaping pile and is going to be continue to discount it because it can't do 40 frames a second at
Oof, yeah.
it's bad.
Well, they supposedly
And
released an updated BIOS that fixed that, but yeah, I mean AMD's
mhm,
in the Steam Deck. They're in the Lenovo. Was it the Legion Go?
Legion Go, they're
They're
in
in all the
the Asus
Ioneo ones, the
Ally, right?
Asus. I think they
Asus
are in the
Ally.
Asus Ally. The Ioneo Air, Air 2, and I think there's an Air 3 coming if I heard. Like they're pushing the handheld and console gaming stuff super hard. And the
And I
interesting thing is that they're not even on Zen 3 yet with the consoles.
No,
At least not
that's what's
not with
so
the
crazy.
Xbox and PlayStation. So, if we see a PlayStation 6 come out, are they going to jump to Zen 4?
I think the loaded question will be, how much of this from the mobile gaming transfers over into laptops. We know that the Strix Point looks really good, which is Zen 3 plus RDNA 3.5.
Mm-hmm.
And that looks really, really well. I'm interested to see, because Strix Point, I believe, is first quarter of next year is when we're expecting to see that Strix Point piece, which is going to be um, AMD Zen 3 in a mobile form with RDNA comparable to an 80-watt 4070. And if that can do that, that's going to be really appealing. And, that could put AMD in a spot where they're making a ton of money off of Radeon without necessarily selling a crap ton of 8000 series GPUs like Nvidia does.
Well, yeah. I mean, the licensing they've
Because
done so far has literally bankrolled the Radeon segment. I mean, it's
I
kept it
think
alive.
that's I think Strix Point could be the point where they start realizing that they could make a premium off of that and not have an APU where you could go to the Asus and say, yeah, you can get the same performance as a 4070. You just don't have to pay Nvidia a crap ton of money and have a dedicated power circuit and have a dedicated memory circuit. Oh, by the way, it's easier to manufacture because it's all going to be in one. And oh, yeah, we can actually afford to use a little bit more power because we're not running two graphics cards. We're just running the one that we have on board.
Mhm.
The efficiency piece of that looks wildly inviting. And I think that part of what they can, and that fits really well because I mean, I know there's gamers out there who buy like 4090 in a laptop, but I think the vast majority of people are looking for something mobile that can do both, and the efficiency of an APU from them would be really, really attractive. And if you're already not happy with that, and you're already going to get the 4070 kind of cooked into your processor,
Hmm.
um, you could see where that's going to be kind of maybe the first step in APUs, maybe nibbling a bite out of some discrete graphics. I don't know if we're going to see that like on the desktop side, but definitely like the mini forums. Like, man, can you think about that? The
Hmm.
minis forum with a Zen 4 and a RDNA 3.5 with some really good ray tracing upgrades. You know, maybe not the fastest thing, but oh, by the way, it's the size of a hockey puck and it uses 100 watts
100 watts
outdoor.
max, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
right.
and the other thing too, in on the mobile side in laptops, I mean, my current laptop has a 3080M in it. And they didn't call it a 3080M, but that's what it is. It's only got 8 gigs. We're talking about going to LPDDR5X with these chips. You don't really see, like, there is a bandwidth difference when you're talking LPDDR5X versus GDDR6, but it's not going to hit you quite as hard as, say DDR3 or DDR4 with an on-chip processor. And we are seeing a lot of the benefits from this development show up on the desktop side because all of the desktop CPUs from the 7000 series on include an APU. They are they are APUs. They're more closely related to Strix Halo, which is two CCDs and the GPU die separate on a single package rather than being a monolithic unit. But you still get that, which, unless you bought a 5700G or a 5600G before, you were kind of hosed for onboard graphics. Like if your graphics card took a dump on your desktop, you were done unless you had one of those parts. And the only reason to have those parts is you wanted to have 5000 series with onboard graphics.
It'll be interesting to see if we have some changes here
Mm.
because think of this. We talk about Strix as laptop, but I thought about this like with Mies Forum and ROG and all these things. You know, that's going to be a formidable CPU and a fairly decent GPU on the mobile side. How long is it going to take for somebody to go in there and be like, "Hey, I can use more than 80 watts.
Right?
um, we could do 120 on this." And oh, by the way, because I don't care about battery life, because I minis form and I'm just plugging it into the wall and I'm using it as a tiny little desktop,
Mhm.
you could see some serious improvements as far as that goes. And you could have a really killer system. I wouldn't say killer, but you could have a very competitive, inexpensive system because it's one chip.
Yep.
You would need that on a board with, you know, you could do the new CAN bus DDR on there, um, and a 2 terabyte NVMe, and let's just put a giant heat sink on it with a fan, so we can tell people that it's cool.
Right.
And
Right.
by the way, we're going to use 120 watts, and but it'll be cool because we're going to actually like use a real CPU processor instead of a mobile thing, and that thing I think would do really well. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
it would do better than anything Intel has.
Well, and they tend to be relatively inexpensive too. So you kind of get the dual benefit of good performance and a reasonably low price. And the performance that they're targeting with Strix and Strix Halo is kind of the upper end of the mid range where, oh, you got a kid that just wants to play Fortnite. You got, grandma in the basement who plays her online poker game every once in a while. Give her a mini swarm, couple $400, and that thing will last forever. Oh, you're muted.
Think about this. I think the other thing that you could also find so many different applications. Plex on a TV.
Yeah.
We have all of these Google boxes that are run MediaTeks.
Yep.
You could do that. NASA's would love this because you would have a CPU and a separate, high floating point processor. You could do a lot of fun things. It will be very interesting. I have the sinking suspicion that Strix Halo is going to have way more uses than I think AMD thinks right now. I think we're going to see some really, really unique form factors coming out of that product and product line. I think the loaded question will be, does AMD realize it and maybe make a couple of extra SKUs here and there? Will there be a Strix Point, you know, mini desktop where AMD's like, yeah, sure, you could do it. By the way, this comes unlocked. It can do 120 watts. Have at it, boys.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
would. To be honest, if I were minis for him, I would be beating down AMD's door right now to
they already
say,
are.
"Give me one,
Yeah.
give me all the watts." I mean, for crying out loud, my laptop has a 180-watt brick for it,
Yeah. I
and
mean,
it's not a big laptop.
no.
But if I could cut that down to even 120 watts and get comparable performance, that means my battery is actually going to survive if I'm not running a 3D application. I mean, as it stands now, I get maybe 2 hours if I'm lucky, and that's on the extreme power saving setting.
I mean, you think about this. I mean, all the work that AMD, that NVIDIA has done getting into vehicles,
Hmm.
at the price, at the performance point that you could do both and really separate it off. AMD could be in a position where they could start going after some of these markets where they have never competed against NVIDIA. And you could finally give somebody to say, well, yeah, okay, you're right. We could do the parallel float point processing, high volume processing that you're wanting. Oh, by the way, we're going to actually have your low level stuff, that doesn't need high performance on this other chip over here so that they don't cross and we don't have to worry about them going back and forth.
Yep.
It could be a really unique and interesting form. Um, I I really hope that AMD kind of opens their eyes of what that could be and maybe looks for opportunities to sell that outside of more than just the laptop, because I really think that some of these could be wildly unique, wildly creative, and something where they would have no competition because Intel can't do it, Nvidia can't do it. The only way Nvidia could do it is if they went with an ARM piece, and ARM on Windows just looks garbage. So,
Yeah.
um, the
Well, and the
last two things, real quick, on AMD in graphics. Have you tried the fluid motion frames too?
I have not, but I
Okay,
hear it's pretty slick.
it's good. It's a driver level enhancement, and in games that do not support a lot of these, um, I was doing iRacing, and I saw a 43% bump in frames,
Wow.
and I couldn't tell a difference.
Wow.
So fluid motion frames too, um, because it's at the driver level, is awesome. I really liked it. I felt like the fluid motion is what, like, version 3 of FSR. It's like 3.7. Like, it's multiple steps up. But the beauty about it is that you don't see the 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 image degradation like you do in some of these other versions. And that is huge,
Well, yeah,
because
that was
regardless of what happens, you could run that and you don't need any support from any of the vendors. It just worked.
yeah. Well, and the quality loss on FSR one, depending on the setting, could be really bad, or it could be just
Mhm.
you don't really see it. Which, I used FSR just to get a little bit of a boost in frame rate, but um, it's if it's that big of a jump, then you're kind of dumb not to turn it on. It's at least for games where it works properly.
I think you're going to find that in the 6,000, 7,000 series where these work, I think people are going to find this in the second, as it goes from primary owner to a secondary owner. And I think people are going to be like, whoa, this is really cool. And I think you're going to start seeing like, whoa, I can get that same frames because I'm turning on fluid motion.
Hmm.
And I could see some seriously cool longevity with some of these products where maybe they wouldn't have that same longevity.
Yeah.
Um, because the other half is like RTX, you don't have to turn it on. You don't have to have support. You don't have to do all that. You just flip a switch and it just worked. Now, I also get that there are probably instances where fluid motion frames maybe isn't perfect in every game. And so I do think that there's probably some work to be done. But so far, my impression is very, very good.
Well, I'm gonna try turning it on and playing with it myself and see what I get, because in Fortnite, because most of the time I play on my TV, and so it's 4K, 120 hertz, variable refresh rate, all that good stuff. But normally on my 68 or 6900 XT, see, I don't know why I keep doing that. I keep calling it a 6800. It's a 6900 XT. um, at 4K, I get between 80 and 110 frames a second, and depending on what's going on the screen. And if I can get, a 10% improvement in that, that's just going to put it that much closer to the frame rate cap of 120 that I have set for my TV, which, you know, anybody who's into Twitch gaming or anything like that is going to tell you frame rate is life. In fact, I remember one gaming brand having that as a slogan for a while. Um, but the beautiful thing about this is that, like you said, it's for 6,000 and 7,000 series GPUs. Well, what about the people who have, say, a 6700 or a 6700 XT, who are kind of on the ragged edge of like, should I upgrade to a 7,000 series, flip on fluid motion frames, and you can buy a year, 2 years out of the card, maybe, depending on how well it performs.
Or, you have somebody who got a card and it's a decent card, but you'd like to get a little bit more performance out of it.
Yep.
I think of somebody who I instantly am going to reach out to because they play Microsoft Flight Sim
Hmm.
at a little bit higher resolution. And this will help them bump their frames without touching anything other than just doing a driver update, which will help them in already. And then you can turn that on. Like, I think it'll be really positive for a lot of people. Um, I think that stuff like this is a really unique, and I think AMD's done a good job at finding unique ways of doing this, albeit not perfect every time. But I will say, better for the community than anything else, because if you look at FSR, I don't care if you're an AMD or an NVIDIA fanboy. All the NVIDIA boys are loving that because if you've got a 1088 Ti, you can turn on FSR and hugely benefit you. And so, and it's open source for any graphics card out there. I love it. I wish more were doing that. And I think that this is probably a smart play. I think, with fluid motion, I think this is a feature that AMD should be really be pushing. I think there's probably a lot of features that AMD needs to look at their drivers for on the Radeon side that maybe need to have a little bit of polish or re-explanation or just make things a little less confusing because I'll admit I'll go into the Adrenaline dashboard and I'll be like, yeah, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I mean it's designed. It seems to me like it's designed by an engineer for an engineer, not
I just
for
think,
the average person.
and maybe some people know about this, and I'm just not in tune with that, but it would be really nice if they would just say this does this and explain how it does it and how it's beneficial and who would like give a use case for it. And anyways, I think that AMD drivers could be better. I believe that Fluid Motion Frames 2 is awesome. And if we're going to see a 2.5 or a 3, I'm super excited. If they can build off of that, I think you could do that. AMD, please, on the next get your team working on Fluid Motion 3 and make sure it coincides with the release of, I don't know, an 8800 XT or something along whatever you're going to call it.
Or Strix
Like
Point. I mean, think
release it at the
about how
same
awesome that
time.
would be for Strix Point.
Oh, it would be absolutely be able to go to a higher resolution and get some decent frames out of it. I love it. Now it's Fluid Motion does do better at above 1080p. So it does like the 1440 and higher, 4K, those types of resolutions. So it does like the higher resolutions and it does better at those higher resolutions on the
Yeah.
percentage bumps. But again, coincide this and then please someone from marketing get with somebody from engineering and find a gamer who can be like, so it does this. And they're like, yeah, exactly. Good. Call it this and say it does this, 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 and this. Like
Yeah.
I almost feel like they need like a gamer to like interpret what the marketing people say because
Yeah.
they're marketing people and then engineers can do. I almost feel like if I could sit down with like a Radeon engineer and be like, it does what? And then like have like the 30-minute explanation of what such and such does, be like, so it does this. Well, yeah, it does all this. Okay, but it does this, right? It does this really well.
Yeah.
Like this, like the chill. Like I'm actually looking in my my adrenaline right now because I'm like, okay. By the way, where is everything?
Yeah,
So
right?
stupid.
Like
Like,
some of the stuff's under settings, some of it's
yeah,
in
like Radeon chill
performance.
limits FPS to save power. Okay, come on.
Okay.
Radeon image sharpening enhances visual detail. What on earth does that mean? Can we
Right.
just not? And from my understanding, it's some of these um, are like for instance, chill is a mixture of like boost and image sharpening, and it's like why won't you just call them what they are? Um. Anyways,
Wow,
I
I'm
wish
digging
that there
through
would.
and there it is. Smart. Wait, no, that's smart technology. I still can't find those settings.
Yeah, you have to
And
go to gaming and then you go to graphics
oh, good
and it's
grief.
under there. And then, oh, by the way, the other thing that nobody has ever been able to tell me what this is. Maybe you can.
Okay.
What on earth is AMD Smart Access Memory?
Okay, so Smart Access Memory is AMD's brand naming for resizable base address, and I can't remember what the R stands for. Resizable bar. It's what gives your
Okay.
GPU direct
But isn't that a
access to
BIOS
system.
setting? Or do I have to enable it on the graphics card too?
Yes, it's both. You have to do
Okay.
it. So you have to do it in your GPU driver, and you have to do it in your BIOS for it to function. And NVIDIA is similar with their stuff. Um, and effectively, what it does is it gives your GPU a direct path through the PCI Express bus, at least from the way I understand it, a direct path through the PCI Express bus to your system memory. So it can pull your GPU can pull data down a lot faster without having to wait for the CPU to say, "Oh, hey GPU, here's some more stuff for you."
Hmm.
So it's it helps in specific scenarios where you're potentially going to be memory constrained,
Which
at least on
shouldn't
the
be an
GPU
issue
side.
with, yeah, it shouldn't be an issue on the AMD side because AMD has been giving gamers a healthy amount of VRAM, unlike Nvidia that just keeps on just like taking a healthy amount, dividing it by 4, and saying, "Here's what you get."
Right. Well, and that's the other thing too is we're starting to see games that at 1080p even are using 10, 12, 14 gigs. That's going to burn up either of our cards in terms of VRAM.
I
And,
think this
you
is
know,
kind of put together. I think that Nvidia saw this. I think that they kind of do this on purpose because if I had a 3070 with 16 gigs of RAM, which granted would have been what 2, 3 years old at this point, right?
yeah,
Or
yeah.
3, that would be doing fairly well. What Nvidia? Seriously, 8 gigs? Like that's what a whole 25, $30. Then just tack it on, and you should have said, okay, it's going to cost us $37 more. And you said, okay, everyone is paying $70 more, and but you're going to get 16 gigs of RAM. No gamer would have complained about that because I
No.
feel like if I got because everyone and their grandmother got gouged on the 3000 series, everyone hated about it. But if
Well,
at
and the
least I had
6000
16 gigs,
series.
if I at least had that, I wouldn't feel like I had just gotten bent over and screwed.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too is I don't remember if it was the 3070 or the 2070, but I remember seeing a video a while back of somebody had taken one of those mid-range cards and doubled the VRAM on it.
Yes,
And they without any change to the bus width, without any changes like that, it doubled the performance.
I think
And
the problem is that's the way that they limit the performance into these cards, and I
yeah,
think that we're going to
yeah,
continue to see that in the 5000 series. So
I think you're right. Unless something really changes in the market, like AMD ends up in the Nintendo Switch instead of Nvidia this time, and like the Switch 2. I I don't think we're gonna see that change. You know,
we've talked about this before. I would be very interested to see if like a modular GDDR6X or a 7 could be implemented where you could upgrade stacks, take off your cooler, take 2 screws off, remove the 4 gigabyte sticks, and put on 8s, and go
mm-hmm.
from a 12 gig card to a 24 gig
24.
card,
Yeah,
and just pay and to be like, the only people who sell these is AMD and our partners. And oh, by the way, you're going to spend $200, but you're going to get the double of the system memory. And system memory is expandable, so your system will just use it as it's available.
the funny thing is, Intel did something like that forever ago. Back in
And didn't
the
release it.
well, it did release. They did make it into the wild. They just didn't sell. But Intel, back in the
Mm-hmm.
days of AMD or AGP, had a 4 megabyte memory card that you could drop into an AGP slot on a board that had, I think it was the 745 chipset. And it would immediately double the amount of RAM for your Intel GPU. Now, granted that they were not good GPUs, but it's been done. And
Yeah.
I would love to be able to, with CAM, I think that makes it, and LP CAM, I think that makes it feasible to have an upgrade like that and potentially easier for the cooler design because then you could build the cooler to sit just on the GPU, and then you put the memory out on a completely different spot.
Yeah. You could even, I mean, there's a lot of cool things you could do with that.
Yeah.
Um, I think upgradability isn't something, but if you think about it that way, is, you'll have a bunch of these boards that you could say, okay, here's CAN bus LP DDR6X, and this is what you have, and this is what you have to use. Where, their board partners, whether it's Power Color, could sell and say, yeah, we have it. It's going to cost you a lot of money because you're multiple generations behind. But yeah, I'll sell it to you. And the upgrade from a 12 gig to a 24 gig is going to cost you $300.
Mhm.
And someone out there will do it. Someone will out there after a 3-year-old car be like, yeah, I want more memory.
Sure. I mean, if it
But,
if it makes the card competitive again and makes it more usable, why not? Right? I
and
mean,
the thing is that you could have them all be the same. And so you sit there and say, okay, it's LP DDR6, and they all get the same speed, and they all clocked the same. And because they're all on the same, here's the same ones. You have one manufacturer makes all of them,
yep.
and it's 2 screws, pop it in and be done. It'd be really kind of interesting. Um, couple last things. NVIDIA antitrust investigation. Let's see where this goes. I mean, I think everyone hates NVIDIA right now because they were gouging for so many different things and selling their GPUs to miners and gamers, but apparently gamers don't remember that,
Well, it's not
or
just
don't care.
that. It's largely over them abusing their position with AI. Because if you look at Nvidia's structure right now, they were starting to go this direction with the crypto markets. They were trying to become the crypto guys, and they just sold GPUs on the side. Well, they did a pretty dang good job of pivoting as soon as AI hit the forefront, and Nvidia right now is effectively an AI company that just happens to sell GPUs that gamers enjoy. And so if you look at their last couple of press conferences, all that they talked about was AI this, AI that. You can do X number of tops on this card, and oh hey, look, if you get this rack, you could do billions of tops. And it's they're really making GPUs kind of a secondary offshoot of AI at this point. And so, it's got a long way to go because apparently the DOJ is starting their antitrust investigation. But considering some of the crap that they pulled with things that drove me away from them as a customer, like light hash rate and things like that, I would not be one bit surprised if it comes out that, oh, they're doing a light AI rate on their consumer GPUs too. And you're not actually using all of your GPU power to process your fun little AI project, like Neurosama, for example, the AI VTuber that's all the rage on Twitch right now. And I think what's going to happen is a lot of this is going to eventually come home to roost. I hope it does, because Nvidia needs to get slapped down on that standpoint. I would love to see them do better, but they just haven't. I mean, as far as products go, yeah, they've done better. They've done quite well. But as far as the way they treat consumers and
Yeah,
they treat the people that are buying their stuff, do better, man. Seriously.
I think there's enough. I think there's enough like concern there. And I think it goes to AMD too. I really wish AMD could come together and maybe be a little bit more aggressive in their performance to maybe give Nvidia a little bit more run for the money. But I also don't blame them because I sort of feel like they've taken a lot of their resources and engineering, you know, people and really kind of gone after Intel with this on a lot of different fronts. They are going to be getting a lot of share and a lot of profit from what they've done on the CPU side. Um, I think that we're probably not seeing a full Radeon team. I think we probably saw some stripped down. I think that might be there might be a reason of why maybe we're not going to see an 88 900 XTX, and I think it probably goes to that to be like, you know what, let's really kind of go after one of our fronts and just go own that,
Mm-hmm.
take a ton of that, and then we're going to come back to Radeon when we have all this money just flowing, and that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see if AMD can kind of come back into the space and get competitive at that higher end, not in the necessary the value gamer budget. The last two things we've got is Arc Skeleton Crew. And where did that come from?
That one actually came out of the Gamers Nexus article. I'd mentioned it previously, but basically the rumors right now are that the Arc driver team is a skeleton crew. They have just enough people to maintain it, and nobody's doing any real optimizations or anything. And if the rumor is true that I heard on the Gamers Nexus video, that does not sound good to me for Battle Mage. I mean, they especially considering the huge layoffs they have going on right now.
Well, okay, so the loaded question I have is did they put all that lot time and effort and programming into fixing like prior games and getting it sorted off where it's better, or is this an ongoing thing that needs to continue to have more work done?
Well, it's one of those things where you always have to keep refining your drivers. You need to keep working on fixing bugs with games that your drivers are causing.
Well,
Bugs that
no,
people with
I
AMD
get
and,
that.
and NVIDIA aren't
No,
having.
but what yeah, but they were going back and fixing games like CS:GO and TF2 and
Right.
some of these not super current games. And they had a team that was going back and saying, "Oh my gosh, if we do this, this, this," and they were doing those things to making some of these not super old, but maybe not legacy games perform way better. I mean, Counter Strike 2, I think, is one that came up on my list of memory and some of the Valve games. But, if you kind of get those things sorted off and you get that, like, is there other work, or is it really you're like, okay, I don't need to have 500 people now that I've gotten all of these older games sorted off? Did you have like a team that was going from like TF2 to and doing all the Valve stuff and then saying, okay, hey, let's optimize, Overwatch or some of these other games that aren't necessarily old but not new? Because I think some of the original Arc stuff was like, yeah, it's good. It's good if you game on a brand new game. Don't
Good
try to
luck with
play
the
something
X9.
super old.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's like, did they figure their DX9 woes out and they can then put that team to somewhere else and they finally run out of projects for them and saying, okay, now we're going to let you go to the CPU side and go have troubleshooting over there? Or do we really think that maybe this could be Intel scaling back their money in GPUs?
I suspect it's part of that because, I mean, look at what they're facing on the CPU side. They're facing potentially billions in terms of costs on the CPU side. And I think they saw that coming and started laying off people before this big announcement.
So if
And
that's the case, real quick, if that's the case, in 1 year, is Arc going to still be a GPU?
I don't know. I don't have a whole lot of confidence right now. And that actually makes me sad. I mean, as much
Because
crap as we've talked about Intel in today's episode, seeing Arc potentially fold is really a bad thing for the industry. We legitimately need Intel or anyone for that matter to step up to the plate and bring some competition back between AMD and NVIDIA. uh,
Okay, so
just to
then my,
cut
my
to be the fly in the ointment, basically.
okay, so then the follow-up question is, we see that Intel is in bad, they're not in happy land. Let's just say that. Okay. Um, is there somebody that could buy them?
I
They're not
mean,
worth a ton. I
financial
mean,
wise, yeah, definitely. I mean, I see before the FTC, it would allow Nvidia to buy Intel or AMD to buy Intel. I could see someone like, a huge tech investment, big money firm coming in and saying, hey, look, you guys are kind of the gold standard. You always have been. You're in a crap place. Let's get it fixed and just drop, 20, $30 billion on the Intel board's table, take them private again, because Intel was private for a long time. Um, Take them back to private, fix the issues, which, there's a lot of things you can do to make good with your 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 system integrators and with the people that you're basically screwing. Um, that you couldn't do when you have shareholders to appease. And everything I've seen about the last layoff, this somewhere between 15 and 18% layoff that they did, has all been to appease shareholders. Well, if you're going to lay off a big part of your GPU team and you're like a year to a year and a half into the first generation of your new desktop GPU, that's bringing some serious competition to the middle range, it's not going to bode well for the second gen, because
well,
you
okay,
need
so
those
let's
developers to work on the second gen. Because a lot of times the optimizations that they're putting in place that go into the first gen are usually applicable to the second gen. And if they don't
Mhm.
have people there to optimize stuff while they're still getting the silicon taped out and spun up for Battle Mage, it does not bode well.
Really interesting. We talk about the market being bad. I mean, in the last 2 days, Intel has lost 30% of its total market value. It was 123 billion as of Thursday, and as of after market hours right now, okay, it is 85.99 billion. 85.99 billion would be a drop in the penny for a lot of people.
I
I mean,
mean, yeah.
I don't think Apple would. I don't think they have any desire to go back to x86, but they could own that.
If Apple owns it, they might. That's the
Um,
thing. Because
Nvidia, which I think probably would not get approval. Um, you start asking some really interesting questions. Samsung has a very complimentary fab facilities, and
yeah,
that would complement what they have and allow them to get into US markets, especially on the fab side. And they have the expertise that could come in and help between the two of them, maybe fix some of these fab pieces and maybe go after more TSMC stuff. Um,
what about TSMC buying them? I was actually thinking about that the other day.
it would be interesting.
Let's see
Um,
what their cap looks like. Well, they're 147 bucks a share right now.
their market
362
cap is
billion.
4.3 billion. No, sorry, trillion.
Oh, I mean, yeah,
Trillion.
that TS. How crazy would this be? TSMC spins out of AMD as Global Foundries and then turns
By
around to
Intel.
buy Intel. And TSMC is already on 3 nanometer. Intel can't even break 10.
Yeah. See, I think that's the loaded question is I think with Intel is going to be they they have the ability on their fab facilities to do some really good stuff. I don't think they're getting it because I think people just assume that Intel's going to screw them and take
Yeah.
their designs.
Yeah.
And I think if you could spin them off into a separate entity, I think it would do very well for them. But I also think that requires probably two sides to this to do very well.
Yeah.
I think you would need somebody who's not in that's in tech, but not maybe not there. Could you see somebody like, it would make sense, like somebody like SpaceX, or Tesla to come in and buy them because everyone's going to need chips. But if you could be like, oh, we're going to run everything on 10 nanometer and they're going to build it for us. And oh, by the way, we need all these chips for different things. We're not going to buy them. We're just going to build it in house. It is an interesting thought. Um, I don't know. I mean, if it is, that would be a stock you would want to be in on because I think anyone who comes in to buy them, if it's the right partner, is going to do very well for Intel.
Hmm.
But Intel, as we know it, is going to be very much not the same. And so, it, there's not a ton of companies that have the market cap, or to be honest, have the desire to really kind of go in and fix the rat's nest that Intel is. Because I sort of question, you know, can they fix some of these things? And that's a really good question. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean,
I mean, we
Intel,
were talking
when,
about like Royal, what was that, Royal Lake, or that's been more or less canned,
yeah.
and they're starting to scavenge that for parts and putting it here and there. Um, I just wonder if the largeness of Intel is going to catch up with them, and they just operate so like big business that I don't know if they'll ever be able to get past those restrictions. But I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. I mean, look at what Intel's been doing basically for the last 10 years. They've been stagnant. It's been 10% here, 10% there. Every generation, you get a little bump in performance. You might get some new features, but they didn't
Who would
have
have
to
ever thought they would
compete.
shoot themselves in the head?
Well, that's the thing is I think Intel's been dying for at least the last 10 years. I think they didn't realize it until AMD caught them with their pants down with Ryzen. And it just kind of fell apart because they came out with Alder Lake and they're like, "Oh, it's only slightly better than AMD. We got to beat them out, beat their pants off." 12th gen's a little bit better, and 13th gen they're just like, "All right, crank the voltage." And there go your CPU. Because my suspicion is they did the calculus kind of like Ford did with the Pinto and said, "Okay, how many of these are going to fail after the warranty? How many are going to fail before? And how much can we afford to lose in lawsuits?" And I think they did the math wrong, and it's coming home to roost now.
Yep.
And that makes me sad. I do not envy anyone working for Intel right now.
See, and I don't like a sad moose, so I'm going to end with a happy. We're gonna make Moose happy because apparently EA has said that they are going to fix Battlefield, and the next generation is super important. So I don't know exactly what that means, but because I love games, I am hopeful that somebody at Battlefield is smart enough to look that like Battlefield 1942 was a thing, and maybe I would love to have them do is to have someone actually say, "Yeah, I played Battlefield 1942. Yes, I played Battlefield 2 back when they were epic."
Mm-hmm.
And oh, by the way, I played everything else since then, and I realized how bad it was.
Yeah.
And our goal is to make it better than Battlefield 2. And
I think Bad
work.
Company 2 was the last good Battlefield game.
Yeah, probably Bad Company 2. The Vietnam was pretty good too. Bad Company
Yeah, it
Vietnam was.
wasn't bad. It wasn't bad.
Um, it was fun, and
Yeah.
I really hope that they do that right. I really have a glimmer of hope because I'd love to see something other than Call of Duty into that shooting space of war, because I kind of get bored and, you know, complained about that. I would also love to see Medal of Honor kind of come back, but I don't know if they'll ever have the desire to do that. But I really hope Battlefield 2, the next version of Battlefield comes out and is really good. I wish they would do it like and just like make it like a reversion. If they just took Battlefield 2 and said, okay, all my art people, this is the game we're making. It's the same thing as Battlefield 2. Oh, by the way, we're going to make it so it looks pretty and it works really well. And it's roughly the same thing. We're going to have newer maps, but you can blow up anything.
Yeah.
I want to be able to drive a tank through a house. I want to be able to like crash my Apache into a tank and have it blow up. I think that's cool.
Bail
You
out
know,
of your Apache before. That way, you know.
I want to be able to take a Doom buggy and plant it with like 500 little C4s and be like kamikaze guy. That
Yeah.
sounds like so much fun.
Yeah.
You know, that should be a thing. Battlefield, I have plenty of options. Tell me, I can sit down and tell your people how to do it. You can make it look pretty, but seriously, don't screw this up or I'm going to be really upset. And I'm
Yeah.
going to turn into a sad news.
Please don't screw it up.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, I mean that might be
On that note,
one of the first few EA games I buy in a long time. But
we'll see.
yeah, I think that'll do it for today's episode. So thank you everybody, and remember to like and comment and subscribe. And if there's anything that we didn't talk about that you think we should in the hardware and PC gaming space, leave it in a comment down below.
Until next time, take care, guys.
Have fun storming the castle.